Ruapehu has become a magic mountain for me. And I feel so small riding up that T-bar, and you look up at the unbroken skyline of white snow and that incredible blue that's there today. That is where the overpowering feeling comes from the mountain for me, and that is where the spiritual connection starts. And I puzzle about that, I think about it, and I realise that there, having grown into it, there is a component that's beyond description, and I call that my spiritual connection to Ruapehu. And as that grows, I realise that the Maori people knew this 1,000 years ago, and that we are the beginners. And so one can look back to the gift of the peaks by the Tūwharetoa people and really understand a little more how they felt about it and how they were prepared to give that, to pass it on.
My name is John Ball. I'm a Canadian. During my summers, my love for skiing led me to winter in New Zealand. I have first arrived at Ruapehu in 1970 as an instructor for the Chateau Ski School. Over the next 20 years, I taught skiing and directed ski schools at Whakapapa and Taroa ski areas. How skiing developed on Ruapehu and my own experience teaching skiing here had a profound influence on me and inspired me to research and tell this story. Sitting amidst the modern technology and buildings of Whakapapa ski area is a symbol of the past. Glacier Hut. Built by some of our skiing pioneers, the hut is now preserved with much history still intact within its walls. By the time this hut was built in 1923, skiing on Ruapehu was already 10 years old. So were these skis. These were the skis worn by Bernard Drake. Drake and his mate, Bill Meade, introduced skis to Ruapehu in 1913. They had climbed to the Crater Lake, which sits on the summit of this active volcano. It was from here that Drake and Meade made their descent. Their descent was uneventful in itself, but it was their leadership and enthusiasm for the new sport that set in place a chain of events that is gradually taking skiing to where it is today. Drake and Meade would make another lasting contribution to skiing, the Ruapehu Ski Club, or RSC. From its inception in 1913, the club has played a leading role in many building projects that has made it easier for others to access the national park. One of the first leaders was club president Bill Salt. In 1920, he led a construction crew of club volunteers and pushed a track into where the chateau is today. Hauling materials by cart, they built the first hut used for accommodation. The goal now for the club was to build a hut right up on the snowfield at 6,000 feet, at what is now known as Hut Flat.
This is Glacier Hut, which was built in 1923 by the first members of the Ruapehu Ski Club. These were the guys who built it. The leader was Bill Salt, who was the president of the Ruapehu Ski Club. Second to him was Skipper Gitos, after whom Skipper's Canyon down here is named. And then there were the two young guys, Leonard and Wilkes. They had a terrible time building the hut because they had very bad weather, howling gales, enormous great wind, that blew away a lot of their roofing material.
Although primitive, this hut was dearly loved and used by RSC members over the next 30 years. In 1922, the Tongariro National Park Board was formed. In an effort to promote the park, the board allowed a private developer to construct the Chateau Tongariro. The entrepreneur Rudolph Wigley had come up with plans for this luxury hotel. The board approved the building, setting a precedent for future commercial development within the national park. The Fletcher Construction Company laid the cornerstone on the 16th of February 1929, and the Chateau Tongariro opened on August 4th of the same year, ushering in a new era for the skiers of Ruapehu.
The chateau in those days was a very special place. I'm sure there wasn't another place like it in the whole country. Ladies wore long gowns to dinner. Gentlemen wore ties. Those that had them wore a dinner jacket and a bow tie. There was a resident pianist who played throughout afternoon tea, and a little band, a three-piece, very decorous band, to play for dancing after dinner. Everybody was on their very best behavior. No bars, of course. Prohibition days.
We had our little parties, but of course in those days it was considered dry. You couldn't buy alcohol, but at the same time we always seemed to have a plentiful supply. And we had a pretty good setup with the local Cascade Brewery in Taihape. You could ring them at 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon. They would put the beer on the express and we would have it at the chateau through our courtesy of Archie Webb, who had the bus service. And Archie would come in at about 11 o'clock when the party was just starting to warm up. Archie would help us to unpack.
Access to Ruapehu today is easy from anywhere in the country. In the 1930s, getting to the mountain was a slow and more arduous process. For the one thing, road access ended at the chateau, From there, skiers faced a 4-mile walk uphill to the ski field.
I do indeed remember it. We stayed at the chateau and we walked up. It was a long walk, I can tell you. I didn't know whether I'd ever make it. I also had to carry food. I was carrying 2 legs of mutton hung over my shoulder.
We had to walk from the chateau quite often. Would only get as far as Salt Hut. There was no need to go any further. Salt Hut was the home and home part of the skiing world. Everything was walk. There was no toes. If we found a nice slope to play around on, well, that would be our slope for the day.
We couldn't go every weekend, but we went whenever we could and could face that awful cycle ride, Tarmanui to the chateau, and on Sunday evening back to Tarmanui.
During the 1930s, relief workers and prison labor eventually pushed the Bruce Road to where it ends today, allowing access to the ski fields by motor vehicles. This was a big factor in accelerating the growth of skiing on Ruapehu. In the early 1930s, the Depression was taking its toll. The chateau had gone into receivership. The hotel was now owned by the tourist department. To protect their monopoly, the park board placed an embargo on ski clubs building accommodation. However, the Ruapehu Ski Club challenged this embargo.
While Glacier Hut was the first hut built at this level, the second was built by the Ruapehu Ski Club just up the way up here in 1936 with 12 bunks. The ski club had to fight the authorities who did not want anything like that built, but it was built and became known to other skiers as Pansy Palace.
The opening of this new hut in 1936 was truly a milestone for Ruapehu skiing. The road had been cleared for other clubs to follow suit with their own building plans. The owners of the chateau employed skiing experts to help promote the sport. The earliest of these instructors were the Norwegians Mt Ruapheu and Olaf Pettersen.
They were introduced as guides. We never called them instructors. They were not instructors. They were mountaineer guides, you might say, and skiing instruction was a sideline.
This would change with the arrival of Ernst Rossi at the chateau in 1938.
Ernst Rossi was one of the leading Austrian instructors, and his brother Franz, they came out, and that made a big difference to the development of instruction.
Well, when Ernst Rossi arrived, we thought, now this is good. And to see Ernst skiing down the staircase was an exercise that we thought, gee, can we really do that in our day?
Ernst was an excellent instructor, and the numbers taking lessons quickly grew. On weekends, all 500 pairs of skis from the rental shop at Salt Hut would be in use. To keep up with the demand, he set up an education program to train instructors. One of his trainees, Shorty Clarkin, would go on to serve the Chateau Ski School for 30 years. Ernst Rossi wanted to see Ruapehu skiing develop like his native Austria. He began promoting the idea of a cable car.
In 1938, I was the junior member of a team of 4 people involved in surveying, and we were sent to Ruapehu for the express purpose of surveying a line for an eventual cable car to the top of the mountain. And I believe it was a book to start about Salt Flats somewhere.
However, the plans for the cable car faded with the start of World War II. But fortunately, the Scotarazi legacy of the Chateau Ski School continued. Ski racing attracts those with a desire to compete and win. Of those early skiing pioneers who took to the sport, many possessed a similar competitive spirit.
You play to win, and I found that skiing was a good incentive to carry on and have a fair go at that.
Ski racing naturally followed on.
Okay, I got fourth in the men's downhill one year, my last year there.
I think, ski racing was something that I felt far better than just railing from A to B. That you had a little bit of competition, and you met up with the same sort of guys, and your aim was to say, well, I'm going to beat that chap tomorrow.
It didn't take long before competition was more formalized. The Ruapehu Ski Club inaugurated the New Zealand Championships in 1929. Ski racing soon became an important part of skiing. Competition was to be a catalyst for several international relationships that helped develop the sport. The winner of the 1932 New Zealand Championships, the Australian Tom Mitchell, perhaps made the greatest contribution.
Okay, well, this is a photograph of Tom Mitchell. Tom was a great man as far as New Zealand skiing was concerned, and he did a lot to promote friendship and ski-ship, as you want, whatever you like to call it, amongst New Zealanders and Australians. He was a jolly good skier himself. He won 1 or 2 New Zealand championships, and he actually was the one that donated the Mt Ruapheu Cup.
Mitchell also instigated the Dominion Championships, which began in 1936. Now known as the Australia-New Zealand Continental Cup, this race series is the highest level of ski competition in New Zealand today. During the war years, skiing ended for everyone except those who had access to the RSC huts. Ski club building plans and the tourist department services on the ski field were on hold. The chateau had been taken over by the health department and converted into a psychiatric hospital. Skiing was slow to pick up after the war due to the eruptions in 1945 and 46. Finally, the chateau reopened in 1948, and the tourist department added rope tows at Salt Flat and the staircase. Then, in 1949, a wave of ski club building began. Ski hut construction was a classic Kiwi do-it-yourself activity. By the end of the 1950s, there were 35 club huts, making a unique village on the ski field. ski clubs became close-knit skiing communities. They were more than bricks and mortar.
It was probably the love of skiing that was the glue that held all the club together, and certainly the love of skiing is what has made it expand to the stage it is now. When I look back on it, those early days, it was a terrific feeling of comradeship and giving, and when we got the hut together, built the comradeship in the hut was what really got it going, and people were wanting to join Puketoi.
It's a great legacy to have and to be able to pass on, bring our children up here. You know, you come down and you see grandmas and grandpas with their children. Last week I was down here and one of the ladies is bringing her granddaughter down next week and be 5th generation RSC. Bernard Drake Ice Axe, it was entrusted to Julian Tem many years ago to be kept for 100 years, and we call it the President's Ice Axe, and each of these shields has the years and the names of the presidents of Ruapehu Ski Club from the beginning. Even just holding this and you look at the names on it, you've got, you know, Mead, Salt, Mead again. They're the history of Ruapehu, and it's a huge honour for me to think that my name's going to be on it, and a real privilege. And I mean, I've been coming to this club since I was about 5 myself, and it's quite emotional really thinking about it. I never expected to be standing here like this. As a president and as a committee member, we want this here in another 50 years for our children's children.
Ski club life was great. You were all the same, it didn't matter damn where you came from. And I think the fact that you lived together made all the difference. When you shared a bunk room, washing facilities and all that sort of business, it drew you together. I think you met up and you could feel that bond that was there, and it was just wonderful. Well, one of the rewards was meeting my wife, my dear wife Helen, and that was one of the wonderful parts of my married life, was that we enjoyed the same sports together.
In 1949, Walter Heinsley from Cloister, Switzerland arrived. He was to bring inspiration and leadership to the mountain. He had been recruited by the Wellington businessman Brian Todd.
Brian Todd was of the age where he was too old to go to the war. But during the war, he would go to America. And when he was in America, he would go skiing, and that's where he met Walter Heinsley. He recommended to the then tourist board to engage Walter to come here.
The tourist department took Todd's advice and employed Walter to promote and develop skiing in New Zealand.
I was stationed at the chateau. To me, you had to have a flat area to develop and build houses, and for beginners you couldn't choose a mountain that had only steep slopes. So I decided that Ruapehu would probably be the best place.
Walter was an internationally ranked ski racer and acclaimed coach. Gretchen Fraser, one of his American athletes, had recently won a gold medal at the 1948 Winter Olympics. Now, Ruapehu skiers had the services of this outstanding instructor.
I think he was a brilliant coach. He seemed to have ability to get on with people, and he was so enthusiastic, and he seemed to be able to get the message over.
I would think Walter was my hero in the skiing world. He was such a wonderful instructor.
When I first met him and saw him skiing, you know, it was something that we really appreciated, and he was a really good instructor and such a lovely person to get on with.
My strongest memories of Walter are from skiing, and that's one of the few things that I look back on.
Three of Walter Hinesley's protégés represented New Zealand at the Oslo Winter Olympics in 1952. A fitting tribute to his inspiration and leadership.
Yes, the pinnacle, I think, was the selection for the Olympics. There was only 4 of us, and it was going to be a real test to see how we compared with the European countries.
Roy McKenzie used his Olympic experience to help other budding ski racers in New Zealand.
Yes, one good thing from the Olympics was I was able to take some films of the races, and that raised funds from the clubs here and enabled me to set up the Mackenzie Ski Scholarships. And that was for young racers aged about 10 to 12 to have a week's free skiing at Ruapehu and at Queenstown.
These are a few of my trophies.
From Oslo, Wolf Hunt went on to become one of New Zealand's best ever ski racers, winning 6 national championships and competing in a second Olympics at Squaw Valley in 1960. Austie Hayward, one of the country's best skiers in 1952, was considered too old to compete. Nevertheless, he was selected by the New Zealand Ski Council to manage the team, and he was given the honor of being the Olympic flag bearer. Walter Hinesley, to put it mildly, was a bit shocked at the state of the tourist department facilities. He did his best to reorganize and improve the existing facilities, but they were inadequate for the growing number of skiers.
I mean, we had hundreds of rental skis, and we had huge crowds. Buses came up from the cities with people. And
Walter wanted to modernize by building chairlifts, but the tourist department was reluctant to make the investment. His business mentor, Brian Todd, would suggest an alternative.
And Brian starting to press me to make a big move and see that if the government wouldn't invest the money, that we should form a private company.
Walter soon got the wheels turning for the formation of a private company. A provisional board was formed, and Brian Todd was appointed chairman. Under his leadership, the structure of the company was decided. The next step was to raise the finance.
And the money was scarce. I mean, people, as I told you, the wool prices were down. There were rich farmers who told me, Walter, go ahead, do this, we will be in, we will sign 10 shares at least. It took me a day to talk to them to get 1 share.
Yeah, the biggest problem really was raising money for something that looked pretty risky, and it was decided we had to rely on skiers to do that. Walter went back to ski clubs and made an excellent job of that. He was very good at raising funds, and everyone had a lot of faith in it, and if it hadn't been for him, we'd never had a lift, I'm afraid.
After months of traveling around the country, canvassing support from ski clubs, Walter was successful in raising the necessary funds. The new company, Ruapehu Alpine Lifts, got off the ground. New Zealand's first chairlift on the Rock Garden was officially opened by Sir Edmund Hillary on Sunday, the 1st of August, 1954.
It was such a thrill for us after so much had been put into it. Unfortunately, the weather was just so terrible that it wasn't funny. But the thrill of being there and seeing it achieved really made up for that.
Soon after, Walter bowed out of the New Zealand ski scene to return to a new business opportunity in his native Switzerland. His contribution to Ruapehu skiing will never be forgotten. REL continued their building projects. The staircase T-bar was completed in 1955, and the number 2 chair, which began at the bottom of the staircase and ran to the top of the Knoll Ridge, was finished in May of 1956.
To be able to go up that mountain and ski down, and when you saw the the area of the glacier, for example, all that acres of skiable country, and you had to walk, but let's put a chairlift in.
The number 2 chair was tested and commissioned by the Marine Department in May of 1956. 3 weeks later, this chair was destroyed in an ice storm.
We climbed up to inspect the lift, and from the middle station up, it was a complete mess. Hellish. The cable had fallen on the ground in lots of places. The ice on the cable I could hardly get my arms around. Each chair had half a ton or more of ice. Chairs snapped off from the couplings. On the windward side of the cows, the ice was built out up at least 2'6". We looked at the lift, and I can remember it clearly. We looked at one another, and we were completely down.
In '56, of course, they built the first chairlift up here, and that ice conditions, I think it caught everyone unawares, and it collapsed. And since then, I mean, we've learned a lot. We've built majority of the lifts since then on this mountain, and our engineers say that this is one of the toughest mountains around.
Damn!
The time that I've worked and lived on the mountain, one of the biggest things that we had to put up with is the ice. It's the thing that has caused more damage. The wind just stops us from coming up here, but ice can pull equipment down. We've had tires fall down and put lifts out for part of the season, for the whole season. And that hasn't really changed. Even in today's modern world, it still happens. It's only 4 years ago since the Knoll Ridge T-bar fell down. The whole drive station collapsed because of the weight of the ice.
Here she goes!
At one stage I was up one of those towers, and there was so much ice on it that as I started to remove it from the top, the whole tower collapsed with me on it.
Well, with the detachable systems now, we can house all the chairs at night time. We keep the lifts running, the rope can run all night. We have a lot of safety features built in, so it makes it so much easier. And once you get that off the line and get rid of the icing or reduce the icing problem, it's much better.
In the early years, the REL directors did not fully understand the implications of running ski lifts on Ruapehu. They relied on overseas companies to design and build the lift facilities. These companies would build to European specifications. The lack of local knowledge of the conditions on Ruapehu led to many costly and disastrous mistakes. A young Swiss engineer by the name of Lawrence Reeser joined REL in 1958. His skills were quickly recognized, and he was promoted to chief engineer.
We had a wonderful engineer come manager on the mountain, Lawrence Reeser, who was Swiss, and he had everyone had a high regard for his engineering ability. He made a major contribution in the growth of our chairlifts and rope tows and general engineering, which was very, very vital in those early days.
Lawrence would literally save REL. With muscle, welding torch, and number 8 wire, he would put damaged lifts back together and get them running.
Lawrence always led by example. He would show us how to do things, he would do it for us and show us, and then he would expect us to do it properly. Yeah, de-icing, now that was a serious business. That was on a really bad day when there was too much wind to run any of the chairs. We climbed. We really needed to because they'd lost the 3rd chair one season, and Lawrence was quite strict about making sure that the ice wasn't on the machinery. Lawrence had a reputation of being a hard man, but he was really fair. He taught me a great deal about mountains and skiing, and never ever asked me to do anything that he wouldn't do himself. He was a great guy to work for.
It is difficult to estimate the contribution of someone like Lawrence Reeser. He was not the promoter nor the developer of skiing, but simply the hands-on savior. The problems of REL in the 1950s did not dampen the enthusiasm of Ruapehu skiers. Ski instruction and ski racing were doing a lot to help the sport grow. The Chateau Ski School, originally begun in 1938 by Ernst Gotterazzi, gave Ruapehu skiers a completely new concept of what ski schools could do for them. And after the war, Walter Hinesley made a huge impact. But it was the Canadian Harvey Clifford who brought a new professional level to ski instruction.
Harvey was the one that really got skiing started off to a level which has just gone on in that era. I mean, he was a great organiser. He was a very caring sort of a guy as far as the public went up there. Even the staff that worked under him had a heck of a lot of respect for that guy, and he was the only guy that I know really that pushed New Zealand skiing ahead the way it was.
You can remember Harvey Clifford very well, and I think that he really turned the ski school into a professional body. He was always immaculate, he was an excellent instructor, and he seemed to be able to impress the other ski instructors with his attitude. I think Harvey really improved the standard of skiing he made it a common practice for people to join classes. Club people, day trippers, the lot.
Go.
Harvey's commitment to raising the standard of skiing carried over into ski racing. At his instigation, the Ruapehu Racing Zone was created. Its purpose was to put in place an overall managing structure for ski racing. This body is still intact today.
The structure of this body is important. It's driven by parents and manned by parents on a volunteer basis, but that provides for the kids and allows them to do what they want to do and can do best, which is be involved in ski racing.
Go!
Ruapehu ski racers have Harvey Clifford to thank for this legacy. By the end of the 1950s, long lift queues were a reality. REL were keen to add to their existing lift facilities, but the company was finding it difficult to raise the finance for any expansion. To raise revenue, REL issued shares with an attached incentive. Shareholders would receive lift priority by way of a special members' queue.
Well, when we bought those shares, we got queue privileges, and it was one of the incentives, to be honest. Yeah, we felt that we were privileged, and we also felt embarrassed because we were privileged. And so the animosity that grew between the two factions, or the two groups of skiers, is well remembered by us oldies.
There was the members' queue and the non-members' queue. And of course the members' queue was always quite a bit shorter, and we got a lot more skiing than the general queue. And of course the rest, the ones in the general queue, they were really up against RAL.
Back in the late 1950s, I can remember these humongous queues. They were horrendous, and we had to queue up for ages. And then there was actually RAL instigated these members' queues. Well, what a disaster those were.
Roy Turner, a skiing enthusiast and former employee of the tourist department, would become a strong and vocal opponent of the REL preferential queue policy. In 1959, Roy set up a small rope tow outside the Mt Ruapheu Tramping Club. The success of this tow gave Roy the incentive to establish a bigger operation. Roy had neither the money or the engineering expertise to do this. He found both in Jimmy John of GL John Engineering in Stratford.
Roy knew that I had had some dealings with Mount Egmont on the ski lifts and the Flying Fox, and he realised I had an engineering factory, and that's when he asked me if I knew much about the National Downhill. So he said, do you think we could make some approaches to the park board to get a licence to see if we could put a tow in? Because Roy was very, very much anti-RAL with the preference queues. That's why he wanted my support to put a tow in to counter the preferential queue situation on the mountain.
The park board turned down the proposal of Jimmy John and Roy Turner, stating that REL had preemptive rights for the ski lift development on the mountain.
Because it was given by Te Haihau for the people of New Zealand. Why should one enterprise have preemptive rights? And anyway, we weren't getting much satisfaction with the park board, so we took this case to the Supreme Court in Wellington. So we employed Robin Cook. He dived into it and found that they did not have preemptive rights. So then the park board felt that they were free to give us a licence on the National Downhill.
The park board imposed strict conditions for the licence and a seemingly impossible construction deadline of 3 months. The engineering genius of Jimmy John was up to the challenge. Jimmy, Roy, and their construction crew toiled many long, hard days, and the new company, Skier Enterprises, was ready for the 1960 ski season. Roy Turner managed the day-to-day operations of Skier Enterprises for a number of years. He could boast that there was an alternative to the REL preferential queues.
Roy had a lot of sympathy with people of our age group, and although we all had members' passes for RAL, we really gave Roy a lot of support because we were supporting the underdog, and that was really what it was all about. That's why we skied over the far west.
The park board eventually granted REL a license for a palm lift on the downhill, as well as an access chair. REL contracted GL John Engineering to build the chair. The fact that Jimmy John was now helping REL incensed Roy Turner. Roy became bitter, and their association soon ended. Jimmy John carried on, changing the name to Skier Services and installing a T-bar in 1973. In 1974, after a plane accident, Jimmy felt it was time to sell his operation and made an approach to the REL board chairman, Brian Todd.
After I had my accident, of course, then I decided the whole operation was getting bigger, the canteen was getting bigger, and we had a ski school going, we had our Swiss ski instructors. The whole thing was getting too big with my local operations here. So we're talking to Brian Todd about further developments on the mountain. We felt that we'd mastered something, it was a success, so now's the time to hand it over, which we did. And we arranged a price and negotiated a price, and both parties, everybody was happy. So that's what happened.
With the preemptive rights issue settled, the park board decided to give a second license to John Willems for development in Happy Valley. The beginners area in Happy Valley was not seen as much of a threat by the REL board chairman Brian Todd.
My main argument to then Brian Todd, saying, don't look at me as a competitor, look at me as a nursery slope to provide you with your future skiers. And give him credit, I must say that he accepted that.
Willems not only had good mechanical inclination, he was also an astute businessman. He recognized the potential in providing facilities for the hundreds of beginners.
1960. I think that was the first year we put up temporary rope tows. They were run by small petrol motors. A 9 horsepower Wisconsin single banger. It was pretty hard to keep it going at times, but it was very successful. It was very popular. I got some very good photos, and that was the impetus. Then the following year we installed a further 2. We had 3, and at the end of it we had about 12 or 13.
Happy Valley has served beginners well for almost 50 years. It is truly a monument to one of the most capable and successful ski entrepreneurs on Ruapehu, John Willems. In the 1960s, the Tongariro National Park Board was reassessing what further development they would allow in the national park. In a desire to alleviate the overcrowded conditions at Whakapapa, the board issued a prospectus for a whole new ski field development on the southern slopes of Ruapehu. For years, the town of Oakuni had been making efforts to find an interested party to invest in a ski field.
The development on the mountain had to be a major development, had to be a major investment, and that was recognised very early on. And I distinctly remember one cold Saturday afternoon having a directors' meeting in the Oakuni Borough Council, and having this phone call. My wife had they'd rung me at home, but my wife had redirected the call to the council chambers, and there was this Brian Cameron who said he had a brother-in-law from Central Africa who wanted to build a ski field. And I mean, can you imagine somebody in Central Africa wanting to build a ski field on Mt Ruapheu, New Zealand? But that's where Tony Wright entered into the picture. Tony Wright was that brother-in-law.
I was in Zambia at the time working with Coopers and Lybrand, and yes, it was a senior partner of Coopers and Lybrand that spoke to me about ski fields in New Zealand, and it all grew from there. I came out to New Zealand to do a feasibility study. From there, we, the investors, under the guise of Populaire Investments Limited, based in Switzerland, agreed that I would actually come back to New Zealand and attempt to get the ski field underway. We had great difficulty getting the necessary approvals through, and it came to the point where the Populaire interests finally said to me, "We're pulling out."
Tony Wright now sought financial backing from within New Zealand. AHI, Alex Harvey Industries, was looking to broaden their investments, and their managing director, Cliff Cairns, was interested in an outdoor recreation development.
And those were the days, of course, in corporate life where multi-industry companies were happening in many parts of the world. Today it's changed a bit, and it's more pure play companies, as we say, where you get involved with one industry and get large within that industry. But in those days, to spread your risk, so to speak, and to get involved with different things, it wasn't unknown.
In the following month, I guess, received a phone call from the managing director of AHI, Alex Harvey Industries Limited, who was Cliff Cairns, and he invited me to come have a talk with him. And that's literally how AHI became involved. We officially opened on the 24th of May, 1979. The goal always was to operate the most efficient, most environmentally friendly and the safest ski area that is possible to do so.
Taroa's development would have a lasting impact on RAL.
Competition is a great thing, and the fact that Taroa was there giving us competition made us sharpen our act up for service to the public, and we realised that there was more to just running a chairlift up the mountain, that the public wanted a total experience, and that's when the philosophy would have changed, helped along with some competition. But we're a very service-orientated company now.
Tony Wright would manage Taroa for 15 years and make a lasting contribution to skiing. In recognition of this contribution, he was awarded Skier of the Year in 1990 by the ski industry for outstanding services to the sport. Tony Wright, a modern pioneer of skiing on Ruapehu. In the REL annual report, Board Chairman Brian Todd once wrote, "Knowledge of the special problems and the techniques for dealing with them is acquired only by experience, a slow and costly process." Todd was referring to the early years of REL operation. The company faced many environmental problems. The forces of nature tore the operation apart on several occasions. Brian Todd kept REL going during those tough years. He was the glue that held the company together.
I remember the comment being made from the banks where you'd be in a little bit of the red in the early autumn. When will you have some money to reduce your overdraft? And I remember the prime answer was, when the winter comes and the snow comes, we'll be able to pay. But in that period, he would be financially backing, and that's where his word was control, as it were. He really did have control, and he was a wonderful person, and without him, I'm sure that we would not have had the facilities.
Brian Todd was definitely in control of REL. He was board chairman from the time of the company's inception to his retirement in 1980. Brian Todd was determined to make REL grow. Growth and eventual consolidation of all ski facilities would become the goal for REL. Over the years, REL gradually shifted its focus away from just owning ski lifts. The company wanted to gain control of all revenue-earning concessions on the ski fields.
5 concessions using one asset. That's what it boiled down to.
In the mid-1980s, the Department of Conservation had taken over control of the national park from the old Tongariro National Park Board. The department, known as DOC, wanted to create better integration of management within the national park.
In the early 70s, there was a number of concessionaires. For example, there was RAL, and they only really operated ski lifts on Ruapehu. Ski Enterprises had just disappeared, but Happy Valley operated beginners facilities, had some restaurants, and then there was the THC who operated the ski hire, restaurants, and ski instruction. And the department provided car parks, toilets, and ski patrol, essentially, and removed all the rubbish. And it was completely non-integrated, very, very difficult to get good service standards because there was an agreement as to what was needed. Nobody wanted to pay for anything. And the visitor experience, I don't think, was very good.
Soon to arrive on the scene was Dave Mazie, who would manage REL during the period of acquisition of the competing concessionaires. He would turn the REL ski lift only operation into a multifaceted, totally integrated ski area complex.
The company had decided prior to my appointment that the real way to take Whakapapa forwards was to achieve this sole concessionaire problem. The issues and debates between the various concessionaire and the department or its predecessor in those days were insurmountable. And it was really in 87 and 88, from a variety of circumstances, that RAL was able to purchase the operations of Tourist Hotel Corporation, was able to purchase the operations of Happy Valley, and purchase the operations that the department managed themselves up here. And we achieved this sole concession status, which had been a stated aim for some years, and was actually the aim of the department as well, because they'd come to the same conclusion that once we'd done that, we started the planning of taking Mt Ruapheu through into the new century. We've got groomers now that cost us $450,000, $500,000. They've got a 5-year life. Those new lifts we're building, the big two are going to be about $9 million each.
Dave Mazie knew not only the cost of the latest technology, he also knew its value to a ski area operation.
A key part of that from day one we knew would be a significant reinvestment in lifts and snowmaking. And probably snowmaking is the real key. And I would expect that we'll have a 50-gun system that absolutely secures skiable trails on the lower mountain slopes from start of season to end of season. One of the great things in the last 10 years is just the change in technology on what we put on our feet. Skis have changed into the twin tip technology, the carving ski. It actually makes it more fun, it makes it more enjoyable. And snowboarding, though I don't participate in it, has absolutely introduced a range of people either into snow sports or brought some back into snow sports more frequently than we would have got otherwise.
Our skiing pioneers would probably be aghast to see the artificial look to our modern ski slopes. But the new technology has generated a new level of enthusiasm for snow sports. Approaching the end of the 20th century, after the consolidation at Whakapapa, there was only one concessionaire left on Ruapehu besides RAL. On the southwest slopes, Te Roa was successfully taking over, gradually capturing an ever-increasing clientele. Te Roa was now owned and operated by the Grimwade family from Australia. However, before the Grimwades had an opportunity to consolidate their holdings, misfortune hit them. Volcanic activity was nothing new to Ruapehu. Damage had been inflicted on skiing facilities in the past, but the eruptions of 1995 and 96 would begin the downward spiral of Te Roa and give RAL a rare opportunity.
What happened from the eruptions is 95, 96 were financially disastrous. They impacted on RAL and they impacted on the management of Te Roa. And then probably what compounded it was the 1997, 88 and 89 years were very light snow years with limited revenue. And 98 was the only year in the company's 50-year history that the snow just didn't come. And so we came out of that 5-year period, both ski areas with very limited financial resources. It was then somewhat of a surprise and fortuitous that for RAL that Te Roa went into receivership. And we very quickly, as a company, said, this is an opportunity that we have to pursue. We've been talking about it for 2 or 3 years. We've already acknowledged and accepted that it's the best way forward for Mt Ruapheu skiing.
Ruapehu Alpine Lifts truly had something to celebrate with the arrival of the new millennium. Te Roa was now to be another jewel in the crown for the company. From its humble beginning in 1953, through the many hard times, struggling to cope with the weather elements, being the whipping boy and constantly criticized by so many, the company had finally achieved its goal of consolidation of all skiing facilities on Ruapehu. The new millennium was theirs. Our skiing pioneers brought a new sport to Ruapehu in 1913. Over the years, despite the many challenges, several high-achieving individuals made significant contributions which helped the sport grow. This is a tribute to them.